Would you
Okay,
start
we're
recording?
recording.
Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Karolina Kubiak. I am a member of XR Empathy Circle Working Group, and this is our weekly Empathy Cafe series on 10 Rebellion Principles. Each Saturday, we use Empathy Circle process to discuss and explore different principles. Welcome, everyone. The intention of our Empathy Cafe is to create regenerative culture of empathy. We would like to create the space for everyone and give the opportunity to openly express ourselves and feel heard, understood. And for us, this is a mutual process. We do this in Empathy Circle using mutual empathic listening. Today, we will talk about Principle 7. We actively mitigate for power, breaking down hierarchies of power for more equitable participation. I will maybe say a few words about our agenda. We run for 2.5 hours. First, we will give space to our special participant, Simon Bramwell. Then Marta will explain the method. Then we will spread to breakout rooms to practice the method. And we will for about hour and a half. And we will come back to the main session for group report for last 30 minutes. We have habit that we mute ourselves. That will help with background noise, and that will help our other speakers. And I would also would like to ask you to not overuse our chat. We left this option for you for any special cases, but please do not overuse chat because it distracts many participants and pull away attention from the speaker. So please, if we need, please use, but not overuse our chat. So, because there are many of us today, we will not do introductions now, but in the breakout rooms when we will get there. And what is going to happen now? As I said, we have with us Simon Bramwell, who will introduce us to our discussion and about Principle 7. Please, Simon.
A very good evening to everyone out there, and thank you for joining us. I'm Simon Bramwell, so if you find yourself on a lot of Zoom calls at the moment, or you've got in trouble with the law over the past couple of years, you may want to slightly blame me. Yeah, just feeling a little bit of nerves here, mainly because I think principle number 7, we actively mitigate for power, is probably one of the hottest topics out there, not only in the world, but obviously in Extinction Rebellion as well. And for that topic to be given like 10 minutes, it may be a little bit of a trot through just some of the highlights rather than really getting into the kind of meat of it. So as I understand it, we've already got ourselves into trouble by saying something like we actively mitigate for power. The word mitigate itself usually means to make something bad less or less serious or less painful. So we've already come into a relationship where we can kind of automatically project or assume that power is bad. And our own power and the power of things like organizations and states then kind of gets set into a binary position, as it were. So I think we really do need to be aware just of the power, ultimately, of the words we use every day. I'm going to go into a bit of a definition that I love about power, and hopefully expound from there a little bit more. It's also worth noting that the word power, its root is in the Latin word, or rather the Latin language, and means to be able. And it's then that we attach all these things of it to be able to do something, to be able to exert force, to persuade. So anyhow, this is from Martin Luther King, that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And it is precisely this collusion of a moral power with powerless morality which constitutes the major crises of these times. And it's taken me quite a long time to even try and understand power in those contexts. We're very used to being in a relationship of people having power over us, and we usually consider or get wrapped up in what I'd call the story of power, which can take, or rather be a web of a lot of relationships around power. There's our own story of our own powerlessness, which prevents us from, or we see prevents us, or gives us the illusion of preventing us from really being powerful in our lives. And at essence, I wouldn't say that power is a bad thing at all. And one of the things around the story of Extinction Rebellion, the story of power is wrapped up in that, the power of the idea that we can all make a difference, that we can all step forward into our lives and reclaim our sort of radical responsibility for our own power to change the world. And I just ask, just for a moment, just to go back and check in with yourself, with your own feelings around what feelings are moving through you when you hear something like that. And I'll ask a question. And this question is to ask of yourself, like, am I using whatever power I have in the service of love? Via either my voice, my vocation, or my personal and public witness. So where, I would ask, is the story we tell ourselves, of yourselves, of where power is in your lives. And that in itself could do with another empathy cafe in itself, I should imagine. We do not always get power right in Extinction Rebellion. We're meant to be a decentralized movement. And I might be courting some form of controversy here, but especially in the UK, we are not decentralized. We still have hierarchies of power over, and we need to transition to power with and power on behalf of. Power on behalf of nature would be the obvious one I'm thinking of. But all this, we need to also understand that this is a journey, that until we start uncovering where our own stories of power are, where our own wounds are around that within ourselves, that we will then start to really have revealed the nuance of power over us. And for me, one of the moments where I realized that I had power and that others didn't have power over me was one of the first times I had been arrested as an activist. And with my sort of heart beating, waiting for the cops to come and remove me from a lock-on, the question that kept flashing through my head is, what is the worst they can do to me? And I weighed that up against why I was doing this, i.e. on behalf of nature. And the only question I could come up with, what's the worst they can do to me, is kill me. And once I realized that, and once I realized that ultimately I was prepared as well, and I'm also recognizing my privilege of being here in England where that rarely happens. The power of the police faded away for me. And I think it's this constant dance and waltz of ideas where our own powerlessness or perceived powerlessness lies, and then also where our power lives. The power of so many people coming together, the power of people saying no to the destruction of an entire biosphere, ultimately. The power of that idea alone has seen Extinction Rebellion change so much of the narratives of our world at the moment, and I'm hoping will change it even more. Yeah. And so, as you see, like, power is this vast, complex interplay of relationships, ultimately. I will just drop in another quote here. Extinction Rebellion in the UK, in my own mind, has a series of saints, completely unofficial, completely non-denominational. And one of those saints for me is a man called Douglas Adams, who wrote a series of the best books, in my opinion, to have come out of human creativity. And his take on power is also worth looking at. The major problem, one of the major problems, for there are several, one of the many major problems with governing people is that of whom you get to do it, or rather of who manages to get people to let them do it to them. To summarize, it is a well-known fact that those people who most want to rule people are ipso facto the least suited to do it, full stop. To summarize the summary, anyone who is capable of getting themselves made president should on no accounts be allowed to do the job. And I think for me, that sums up the challenges that we face when we're in power beautifully. A lot of people seek power because we see it as a way of either negating or blocking out a lot of the wounds of powerlessness in our own lives. And unfortunately, then when we come into positions of power, we then can run the very, very real risk of abusing power. I think one of my most poignant moments in recent months was when I was talking to a man called Dominic Barter, who does a lot of work in the favelas of Brazil with restorative justice. And he asked a question which I think everyone in power should deeply, deeply consider for at least a year before they even step into power. And that question is, what do I need to protect you from me? What do I need to protect you from me? And I think if we can change the conversation around power, that question is absolutely fundamental to how we do that. If I'm aware enough of myself, if I'm resourced enough, if I'm empathic enough, if I let in wisdom, then I can ask that question of myself and answer, what do I need? It might be, if I'm going to make a powerful decision, to get a good night's kip. It might be that I need counsel from other people. It might be I need information, whatever it might be. But coming back to that question is not asked enough in these times. And I don't think we'd be in the position of having to actually protect our environment if we ask that question of ourselves on a regular basis. The story of that power and of how power is used and viewed at the moment is also changing. One of the big attractors, as I see it, in the power of Extinction Rebellion story is this idea of community power, of common democracy, of people power. We must find ways to this new power if we are going to make the kind of equitable community and global decisions that are going to see us into the, hopefully, next stage of this great unfolding that's happening around us. That idea And as someone great once said, like, ideas are bulletproof. That idea, once it takes off, I think, could explode around the world. And I think it's also a concept worth exploring around what do we mean by new power. Like if what we called old power is the power of, say, like one person over many, that's unaccountable, it's occluded, people can't see through it, there's all those kind of things. And what do we mean by new power? And for me, that is the concept of power with, or power on behalf of others. How this shows up is then down to us. And again, that's going to have differences wherever you are in the world. And for that to show up properly, again, we then come back in this other sort of strange kind of cycle of having to then think about things like the words or the aspects of our culture that have power that we can't see. So that might be, for me, as a man, like the power of my masculinity, the power of patriarchy. The power of my white skin is another obvious one. It also might be the frustration I find with listening and talking sometimes, and feeling not heard. So all these things come down into it, and how we use it. And so I fully believe that if we distribute enough power with around the planet, a lot of that wounding starts to get spread out. We all start to carry it on our shoulders in a way, especially when combined with compassion and empathy, that those wounds can't get hold or gain traction so much in the ways that have abused so much in the past. One of the biggest aspects of power is the power to decide where power shows up. And I'm recognizing it once again, like, as a co-founder of XR, I have a very, very particular power to present ideas, to be heard, to have a sort of ideological gravity or weight of momentum behind me that others may not have. Yeah, so I think I might leave it there, because otherwise I think I could ramble on and on and on, which is, of course, another form of power over. So I'll hand it back to Carolina and Edwin, and hope you all have a good cafe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edwin. Thank you. You can see it on your smartphone, but we see appreciation from many participants for your speech. Thank you. Now I would like to ask Marta, one of our co-facilitators, to explain the method. Marta, over to you.
Thank you, Carolina. Yes, so an empathy circle will, for those of you that are new to the practice, from here we'll go into breakout rooms. So an empathy circle is a circle with about 3 to 5 people, one of them being a facilitator. And the process is a bit different from normal conversation. So in normal conversation, a person speaks, another one responds, there's questions, there's communication going on. And in an empathy circle, there's a very structured process that intends that everyone takes turns in speaking and listening, and then reflecting back, so that the speaker feels fully heard in what they're sharing. So at any given moment, and the facilitator will help by timing the turns. So I think we'll do 5-minute turns maybe, and the facilitator will have a timer or will take care of that for you. At any given moment in time, there's 3 rules. There's the speaker, so whoever starts speaking, and before they start, they pick someone else in the circle with them to be their listener. And then they start sharing for those 5 minutes, and they'll stop, they'll pause often after one idea, 1 or 2 sentences. And when they pause, their listener gets a chance to reflect back to them what they've heard in their own words, or repeating, paraphrasing, really reflecting back what you've heard. And then the speaker will check in with themselves. Yeah, that was what I meant, or not quite, and then they'll make some corrections. And then Maybe if that was, what they meant, then they'll speak some more, they'll pause again, the listener will reflect back, and so on for the duration of those 5 minutes. In the end, it's a collaboration between the two people in that moment so that the speaker gets a sense of feeling fully heard. And then after that exchange, the person who was the listener becomes the new speaker. So they pick someone else in the circle and they take their 5 minutes of speaking and being reflected. And so we just carry on around the circle like that for about an hour and a half. And the listener's role, I suppose, is just trying to be present with the speaker in their world and what they're sharing, and trying to be as accurate as possible. The idea being that you'll save any of your own ideas, questions, analysis, even validation. You try and keep all of that to yourself for your 5 minutes, and then you're very welcome to use there. We've got a topic today of the principle that was so beautifully shared. But in an empathy circle, if there's something else that is important to you right now that you'd like to talk about, you're always welcome to do that as well. And then there's a third role there, which is the silent listener, which is everyone else in the circle that is neither speaking, not being the active listener. They're just paying, giving attention to the process, being there with everyone else, observing what happens. And it's quite interesting to see how our attention shifts from being an active listener to a silent listener. And last thing I'll say is sometimes it's helpful for people to have a piece of paper and a pen nearby, not as much to take any notes when you're the listener. You can ask, even if a sentence, you can ask your speaker to pause so you get a chance to catch up and reflect. But in case during your listening, there's your own ideas that come up and you just want to write a word or two down and keep it there for later, for when it's your time to share. I find, for me anyway, that helps. Yeah, Carolina, that's it, I think.
Okay, thank you. So now we are going to the smaller groups in the breakout rooms. In a second, I will ask Edwin to introduce us to our facilitators and groups. I just want to remind you that we will start with short introductions, your name, location, XR group you are a member of, and then we will start practicing the method. Edwin, how you spread, how we are spread?
Yeah, right now we have you in room 1, 2 is Bill, 3 is Martha, 4 is Anne, and we have kind of varying number of people. So people have left, some people have come, so there might be like 5 people, or in one group there'll be 6. So
Okay, I will share with you once more our principle number 7, so you can see it constantly when you are in a breakout room. So let's go.
Okay, open all rooms. So here we go. Should be able to see the link to join the room.
I suppose there should be also my mobile phone, because I'm securing myself with mobile connection.
I did put your phone in here, so I'll check.
Okay, so let's start with introduction. I will start with myself. My name is Karo. I am based in Poland, Central Europe, and I am member of local XR group, but also Regenerative Cultures Working Group in Global Support, and obviously Empathy Circle team. And I pass to April. April.
Hi, I'm April. I'm based in Scotland at the moment. I am part of XR Guardianship and Visioning Circle, and I've been with Extinction Rebellion since it was rising up, so I've seen it evolve. I'll pass to Nicole.
Hi, my name is Nicole Hartley Bradford. I'm zooming in from Calgary, Alberta. I'm part of the local Extinction Rebellion group, as well as I'm interlaced with lots of different regenerative culture hubs all over the world. So I'm super happy to be here. And I'll pass to Edwin.
Yeah, Edwin Rutch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy and the XR Empathy Circle Work Group. And I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'll pass it on to Dean.
Hi, I'm Dean from Plymouth. I'm involved in XR for about 18 months now. I'm tentacles all over the place. And I'll pass it on to, I think I'm the last one.
Yeah, you are the last one.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
So I think we can start. And Edwin, are you very occupied now? Or you, because you might drop in, drop out.
Yeah,
I know.
I'm doing the technical stuff too. So did you want me to start speaking or to moderate?
Yeah, I
or?
would like to suggest that maybe April and you will start, because April, what you think?
Okay, well, I'll speak to April then, just to model it for anyone. Yeah, the power, that's a big issue. So it's a great topic, because the power and how power works is is very interesting. Simon mentioned one time he mentioned empathy, and I think that mutual empathy is something that sort of mitigates for power. That I think what we're doing here is very central to the whole power topic.
Yeah, thank you. I'm present to that you appreciated Simon's unfolding of this big, interesting topic, and that he only gave a little mention to empathy, and you feel this is key to mitigating power, is mutual empathy.
Right. It's like here's a group or 5 people here. What's the power structure within this group? And we have an agreement that we're going to use like a certain process. We're each going to have like 5 minutes to speak, and we're going to each get heard to our satisfaction. So I see this as like a core versus like one person is going to do all the talking, everybody's just going to listen and sort of take it in. So those are 2 different models of how we can relate with each other, and they seem to be sort of the different poles. And
So you described 2 different poles, seeing the Empathy Cafe itself as the structure, holding a real balance of time, of listening and unfolding, and that the other end of the scale is where everyone just listens and one person gets to talk, and everyone else has to just absorb.
Exactly.
So the structure holds the balance.
So I would love to see the empathy circle more as part of XR, that like XR meetings kind of start with an empathy circle so everyone gets heard, because I've been to, plenty of meetings here in the Bay Area where that doesn't happen. There's somebody in charge. It's almost like, there's just not that shared sort of connection. And I see a lot of people leave because, hey, I'm not getting heard here. I don't want to take part in this. So I would love to see the empathy circle as a core foundational practice in XR for distributing power, and the power of being heard. It's that everyone gets a chance to be heard.
I hear your desire for empathy cafes to be used to much better effect and more expansively within XR meetings even, and just, to really start off and balance right from the beginning those voices within this, held in this structure.
I feel very heard. Thank you, April.
So I will only add to other participants that you can end before the time is up. When time is up, I show my telephone, my timer, but it doesn't mean that you have to stop talking in the middle of the sentence. You end your thought and you are reflected back. This is just the indication. So maybe at first round it will be a little bit stressful, but then I hope you get used to this indication. Okay, so now it's your turn, April. Whom you choose it?
Thank you. I would ask you, Caro, to listen. Thank you. Yeah, I was really interested and fascinated listening to Simon's kind of rolling out of this principle, and I was interested also because he missed, there's one bit that has really puzzled me, and that's about the grammar. We actively mitigate for power. So if the word mitigate is about balancing, if you're balancing for something, you've already got it wrong. It ain't balanced. So, you know, there's been a lot of controversy around taking the for out. Is it grammatically correct?
Yeah, so you were listening, you appreciate what Simon was saying. It was interesting, and you were listening to that very intensively. And you noticed that something was missing in his speech, which is grammar of this principle. And this is the thing that many people ask about. We say in this principle, we actively mitigate for power, and this for power is very often creates a lot of questions, doubts. That's what you mean?
Yeah, I guess if you're applying linguistic rigor, that there's there's something wrong in that, in having the for there. And as somebody who believes in the power of words as spells, sacred sound being released into the world, when you have an ambiguous meaning in the words that you use, you're already muddling the spell.
So you think that if we treat those principles like a spell, if we notice that if we think about them, if we believe in this spell power in words that we voice, we already create something by saying mitigating for power. And
yeah, I guess just that that it's already muddled. There's not the linguistic rigor that could be taken. And for me, there's it's also something about sound, vibration. Everything is made up of molecules vibrating. That's what sound is. Mm-hmm. So this is for me, you know, you can and as somebody who uses their voice in a therapeutic setting, I recognize the power of that vibrational, the use of vibration, sound in the world. It has the ability to move molecules and feelings. It's very powerful.
So you believe in this real bond, so to speak, between voice, sound, and vibrations, our physicality. So you find that there is connection when we say this principle and what's happening to the world, to us, with those vibrations we send. Is that what you mean?
Yes, though I'm not.
You can correct me.
Applying that to the principles, simply I'm recognizing that there is power in these manipulative mouths that can shape sound, which is just waves in the air, we can shape it into words. And if we don't apply rigor to what we say when we roll that out, that it, more than just causing confusion, thank you, it also actually can have a powerful disempowering effect in the world.
So, if I understand you correctly, you saying that this process of saying is also powerful, and this moment when we express this principle is very powerful, and you perceive it as a power of empowering.
Yeah, that's it's enough. I'm not reaching to my own linguistic rigor, so thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Wasn't easy for me because English is not my first language, so I very often feel a little bit lost, especially in linguistic grammar. I will choose maybe Dean. Dean, would you listen to me?
Certainly, Carla.
Okay. What stuck with me from Simon's speech was this Latin origin that power is about being able. So we mitigate for being able, and it also means that we want to shift the ability to others, to spread more equally the ability. I stop there.
The root word from the Latin, power, is the ability to get things changed, to get things done. And in the XR application of it, you're talking about, as far as I could perceive, enabling others to actually have power.
Yeah, shifting this ability to others to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is very interesting because, as Simon said, he is in power of skin, of his gender, and of his rank in XR. I also feel sometimes in power, however, not power of gender, but power of my rank in XR. And I'm struggling with my power because I feel that I have something to offer, but I know that this way I shut down others.
I hear the conflict within you about the power dynamic struggle. You mentioned Simon's power, power of his gender, the power of his rank, and then you mentioned your power and how you are conflicted by this power because you have the power to stop others from speaking, and you're not comfortable with that sometimes.
Well, I didn't say the speaking, but one person who is perceived as a person who knows more speaks, those who are perceived as they know less stop talking, and we don't know what they would say if they would be speaking, and maybe they would say something much wiser than I have to say.
So I hear you reflecting upon the ranking system that causes those with lesser ranks to sometimes be quiet when others with a higher rank speaks, which is quite often not a good thing, because those in a lesser ranking situation may have a more valid argument than those in the higher ranks.
Yeah. But what if those with higher rank have something valuable to say?
So there is a dichotomy between this challenge of having power but not abusing power.
Mm-hmm.
There is another side to it that I haven't quite got from you yet. I
Well,
can feel there's this other dimension that I haven't quite seen.
I mean that, well, we want to mitigate those in power. We want to diminish their power. But what if they have something valuable to offer and we lose because we mitigate?
I hear you say. You say now. I understand now. You're saying that sometimes those in power that we are trying to mitigate against may actually have a valid argument for something to put across to the others. So if we constantly disperse power, we can actually stop the effectiveness of the dynamics of someone's understanding from being understood.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No, not sorry. I just show that my time is up. I just want to say that it's a problem. How to deal with it? I see this problem. Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard. Your turn.
Thank you. I'll choose Nicole. I think Simon's speech was a beautiful thing. But like April says, words are very powerful tools. They set resonances going within others, so we should use them with caution. Sometimes people take advantage of their rank without even realizing it because of their unconscious bias. So we have to constantly have people checked by others and checking themselves. This is what I understand by mitigating for power, so that we can have a checks and balance on power itself.
I hear you speaking to the beauty that you saw in Simon's words, and I see you also reflecting and considering the balance between how we use the power we have and how we might empower others, especially in circumstances where we might not even realize the power that we do or don't have, and how we're influencing others.
Yes. Words are very powerful vehicles. As we speak, we are invoking emotions in others. So we must learn to be very considered before we actually say something. Whereas previously, before undertaking the empathy circle routine and rigors, I cast words asunder, left, right, without even considering really their full deleterious effect that they could be having on others. I thought I was being flippant and wise and clever. And it's only when you hear your thoughts back do you actually realize that it's not wise and clever. It's actually wounding, disarming, and disabling. We at XR are trying to enable, not disable. Okay, we may be disabling the old structures, but we're trying to enable a new modality of communal living and communal working.
I hear you owning that there have been times when you have spoken, used your words, used your power to say things that at the time you thought were, smart and flippant and harmless. And I hear you recognizing that sometimes you may have said things in ways that weren't well considered, and that may have caused harm to others. And I see you owning, and I hear you owning that that's not what XR is meaning to do. It's maybe meaning to make a kind of disempowering effect on structures that themselves disempower. But I see you recognizing how delicate it really is and how much consideration it really calls for.
Yes, thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Welcome. April, would you listen to me, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that this is the topic today. I've been hesitating and holding back so often in the last while, recognizing that as a type of leader, I do have power, and that if I'm going to use it in a way that is empowering and is for love, that I need to be very well considered. And I'm noticing how often the little pieces of unresolved grief in me get touched and have me like burst into action or words to detrimental effect.
Yes. Oh, I heard a sigh of relief at being here on this topic, as it's something that is very relevant in your life right now, and that you are very conscious of the responsibility that power lays on you, and that is making you perhaps super sensitive as well to noticing when you are in reaction, when these places of perhaps unresolved grief get touched and a burst of words come out that aren't as considered as you would like them to be, knowing the power that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I notice, like, as I open there, I notice this anger that comes from how that grief got in me in the first place. And I notice the anger that comes from how often I seem to perceive myself as the one in the room who's willing to be responsible, while other people in the room or the sphere are either taking power and abusing it, or deferring power to me and not maintaining their own power. And then how that puts me in this tricky bind that I think all of us have spoken to already, where suddenly it's down to me. And I want to share power. I really do. I get how it doesn't work to not share.
Yeah, I just want to share, this is touching me and, making me feel emotional. So thank you. Yeah, I really, I hear that that it sometimes feels like you see things in the power dynamics, in the way people are engaging with each other, in their stepping in or out or misuse of power that perhaps other people aren't seeing for some reason or other. And that responsibility then lies with you, seeing this mismanagement or giving away of power to step in and try to use it responsibly. and that weighs really heavily on you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I notice how when I do feel angry, I start to put responsibility, which isn't it the same as giving away power to others to act? And yet, again, that's like another inside outing of it. And, you know, a story was playing out for weeks and weeks in my home. And I was locked in this strange dynamic. And then I asked for help. And I suddenly noticed that me asking for help actually did mitigate for power. It broke the lock, that the stuckness that we were in. And I thought, my gosh, that was so easy, and yet it took me so long.
So you began with a recognition that when this kind of reactivity is triggered, which kind of comes out as anger, that you kind of end up delegating jobs, which is either power over or giving away your power, and not where you want to be. And that in a situation that you've been living with in your home for a long time, when it got to a breaking point, you finally asked for support. And that the very act of asking support seemed to do something in spreading the responsibility, in sharing the power that had been kind of, you know, that had been a burden of you, within you, of trying to hold how to sort this out.
Thank you. Well, I feel heard. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask Edwin if you're free.
Yes, listening.
Thank you. So I would, there's two bits. I think actually I'll come to the bit. There was a quote that from Dominic Barter that I remembered differently than Simon, and it wasn't that. It was that when the question that he asked was, what support do you need? What do I need to protect you from me? It wasn't what do I need, it was what support do I need to protect you from me? And that Dominic Barter's work with restorative circles is rooted in, you know, support, support, support. That is where you get the reflection that you trust, that says, you're in reaction, stop. Or that says, you need a break, it's not working. Or that says, you know, how can we help? Or that just listens to you, gives you empathy down the phone when you're about to go into a big meeting that is, you know, is crucial, that you don't get reactive. Or the middle, sorry.
Yeah, so there's a quote by Dominic Barter that's very meaningful for you, and it's about asking for support. It's like asking, what support do you need? And so it's that quality of asking for support or requesting support. I think that's meaningful. I mean, yeah,
I guess because Simon quoted it as, what do you need in order to do, what do I need in order to protect you from me if I'm in power? and for me, it was that the support bit is the important, and it's not necessarily about asking for support, because in my times of biggest crisis, I'm not capable of asking for support because I'm lost. I'm in reaction, or I'm in breakdown, or I'm hiding. So it's about putting in the support in advance, asking the question before I step into the places where power is asked of me. Put the support in first. Ask myself, what support do I need to protect these people from me going into reaction? Because I'm powerful, and it can crush people, and it can hurt people. And I might not even know I'm doing it because it's inherited or, educated behavior that I'm not even aware can hurt people.
So you have a little bit different understanding of the phrase than Simon had. And yours is, so before you go into a situation, it's like asking, like, what support do I need? And I'm hearing it sounds like I understand that you're very concerned about sort of power over hurting people, having an impact on people, and you think that just asking for support to begin with is what you'd like to do.
I'm certainly aware that that's what. Thank you. That is what works. That is having an impact on my ability to have confidence to step into the power that I am generating through persistence in Extinction Rebellion. I was there with Rising Up. I was asked if I considered myself a founder. I immediately recognized there was a danger in having a label that somehow gave, we call it power, but there was something different about labeling yourself a founder, as if people should listen to you more, or, there was something about asking for something by having that label. And I didn't want to be associated with that.
So you're hearing, you have concern about like being labeled a founder, because that gives you a certain power, and you feel uncomfortable with that. So it's the labels that give you power. It sounds like you're feeling uncomfortable with that because you're wanting like more equality, or I'm not quite.
Thank you. I certainly was back then.
Mm-hmm.
Differently, maybe
Okay.
now. Thank you very much. I feel heard. Thank you.
Okay. Speak to Dean.
Ready. Thank you.
Yeah. Somehow the thing that was coming up for me is about it's like, you can have power, but it's also the person who's receiving. So, like, I know in political leftist, world, it's like, oh, you don't want to, you can't say certain things because people might be offended, right? That so you're sort of like censoring yourself all the time because you can't say something that others will be hurt by. But everybody is hurt by different things. You don't know what the impact is going to be. So there's something about that that's kind of coming up for me.
I hear having a reaction against the PC correctness that's self-policing us into saying something that we shouldn't necessarily say, or not saying the things that we sometimes think we should say, and this creates a disharmony.
Yeah, and it's like for the person who is the receiver of something, and then they can say, oh, I feel so hurt by what you're saying, is you can also, that person could also empathize with what the person is saying. And I think that's sort of a mitigation of power right there. Instead of sort of taking it personally, you just empathize with them. And it sort of transforms the, it transforms the dynamic, from, oh, I'm hurt, to, oh, I just hear, this is what you're saying. And so there's sort of a responsibility, I guess, on everyone's part.
I hear that you're saying we all need a little bit more emotional intelligence. and we need to be a little bit more aware of why people are coming from where they're coming from.
I would say it's not so much just emotional intelligence, but just empathy. That it's a mutual empathy, right? It's like, I mean, people, and that's like with the empathy circle, it's like you can say whatever you want. There's no, like you were saying, political correctness, but whatever you say, it can be a judgment, it can be whatever, it gets transformed through the empathic listening, right? I could say, oh, Dean, you're an idiot. And you would just reflect back, yeah, I hear you say I'm an idiot. But that reflection kind of transforms the judgment or whatever, you know? So, yeah.
I hear a certain sense of pride about the way the empathy circle works, which I can understand comes from a lot of practice, because you're deeply ingrained in the empathic way of thinking. So this need to elucidate the beauty of what empathy can bring to the enlightenment of each other is an overwhelming need that we all need to pass on to others, not just have within ourselves. So.
Yeah, more or less. It's like, I guess it's the power of empathy. You know, I mean, I know it from myself. I get people, you know, we go take the empathy tent out to these political rallies, we take it out to the streets, and people are, you know, kind of criticizing, you know, whatever, and we just sort of empathize with them and hear them. And it actually creates a sense of connection, I find. So I guess it's that part that it's, you know, let people, if you can get grounded enough in an empathic presence that you can sort of transform, I think that sort of these judgments, I guess, would be a form of power over maybe trying to suppress people. So I'm just kind of, you know, my mind's just kind of rambling here.
I hear a need to pass on the understanding of the fact that just by actually listening to someone, we can actually calm them down by the fact that they've actually been heard for the first time, rather than not being heard. Actually can be a very good way of getting people to be more aware of not only themselves, but listen to others around them, because they have seen that this practice is a good way of actually working through the empathy tents, going around from place to place. You've opened up more people to this whole new concept of actually being quiet and listening.
Yeah, I feel calmed down because you've listened.
So
just reflect that last part.
Listening, or being listened to, rather than someone pretending to listen, actually reflecting back at you that they've actually understood what you said, is a double validation, because you've not only said it and you've heard yourself saying it, but you actually heard someone saying it back to you. And if they say it back to you in a way that you understand is what you meant by what you said, then that's a very good practice, and it's very rewarding for both people.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an ad lib, but yeah, I feel heard. My time is up.
Yeah.
I did wander off the point. I do apologize. It's just, there was so much animation and passion in there.
Would you
I'm becoming
choose
passionate as well.
someone
So
before
I will not talk forever, because I can do this very easily. I will choose you,
me?
Carla. Yes.
Okay. I will listen.
I will try and speak slowly, because
you.
I'm aware that I am aware that it's not your first language.
Thank you.
You need to calm down, man. I used to think mitigating for power meant that we were trying to stop people having power. But in this last 40 minutes or so, I'm starting to think differently. Actually, mitigating for power seems to me to mean allowing people to be prepared for the responsibilities of power.
So you always was thinking, you always thought about this phrase, mitigating for power, rather as mitigating power. Um, but for last maybe 40 minutes, you have been changing your way of thinking, and now you start thinking about actually mitigating for power, for enabling other to their responsibility.
Yes, because sometimes the powerful or the people in positions of power forget how they can be affecting other people because they are no longer in the position of being subservient. They are in the position of dominance. And this position of dominance is an old modality that we need to transcend in the new way of working. The best way I've heard of it described is feminizing politics. I went to a really good debate about this, and that opened me up to this new concept of thinking about the masculine as not necessarily positive thing, and not just a person, but an institutional, not just a human being.
I will try. That might
Sorry.
be difficult. So you noticing that usually what people think about power, it's about domination, some people over other people, and giving power is giving this ability to dominate. And you believe that we have to change that pattern of thinking. We have to start thinking different way. We have to create different understanding of this process. Otherwise, we will still be in the old model of power. Is that what you meant? You also mentioned about masculinity, feminization of politics, but yeah.
Right. So it used to be the male or the dominant masculine force is not just to do with gender. It's to do with institutions.
So you believe that this is not just about some features of power like masculinization, but it's actually the whole institution, the pattern, the institution. You say it's institution.
Yeah. Our institution is still in a colonialist, extractionist modality. We dominate, we extract, we leave.
So you believe that this institution of power is still the old model, colonial model, when we conquer something, use and leave.
Yes. How do we get those people invested in this old modality to be aware of their transgressions of what they do to others?
So you're asking the question how we help or maybe support those people in power to realize this dynamics, and that you said transgression to the new model.
That's close enough.
Correct me.
In the old way of working, it's about domination and taking. Now, what we need to do is transition move from this old way of taking to the new way of sharing. But I didn't actually say that last part, so that's probably why it was hard
Okay.
for you to
So
understand.
you mean that until now power was understood as taking. When we want to change it into a new modality of sharing.
Hmm. Thank you. I feel hurt.
Thank you. Thank you. I will choose Nicole. Nicole, would you listen to me? That's become very interesting, very dense discussion. I like it very much. And I would like to add one more piece to this puzzle. I stop there.
I hear you expressing that you maybe feel excited. You find this to be very interesting and you have a piece to add.
Well, I have a lot of pieces I would like to add and talk about, but I think that I want to focus now on time because I believe that time is actually one of the most important factors in our culture. We are deprived of time as well as deprived of power. We are deprived of time as well as deprived of ability to change. That's the problem we have.
Wow.
And that's the problem we want to change.
I hear you saying that there are a lot of pieces to add, but the one that you're thinking about keenly and wanting to focus on for some time here is time. And you sounds like you're noticing how when we're deprived of time, it correlates to being deprived of power.
Mm-hmm. So now we are not, we are slaves of time, or rather lack of time. We don't have time. We have just time to work, regenerate, to work again. And maybe sometimes in the meantime have family, children that will work to regenerate, to work again. That's how we function. There is no space for wandering. There is no time for wandering, doubting, and changing the world. There is no space time for it.
I hear you now kind of including space as part of time and noticing how with the way the world's set up that so much of our time and space is devoted to working, that doesn't leave much time or opportunity for questioning and doubting and wondering and doing things differently.
Yeah. So not having time, we don't have power to change the world. That's how I see it.
So
We don't have ability to change the world. We don't have power to change the world.
right, so you're seeing a correlation between time and space and ability and power.
Yeah. So I have a little silver lining in the fact that lately during the lockdown, many people discovered time. They even got bored, which is lovely state of mind because we are very often become more creative when we have opportunity to get bored. I hope it will impact shifting the power to people, shifting the ability to change the world to people.
So I see you noticing a silver lining in this COVID crisis, in that it's it's given people time, in some cases even enough time to get bored. And it sounds like you feel a little excited and hopeful that maybe because people have had this time, that something might happen with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm curious what will gonna happen next when the lockdown will end and people will be forced to come back to the old routine where they again will be deprived from time.
I hear you expressing your curiosity as to what might happen when the lockdown is lifted and people then are in a position of being forced or required or having power say that they need to go back to these old ways where they didn't have time or space to see to some other types of things.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard.
Thank you. Edwin, will you hear me?
Listening.
Thank you. It's really occurring to me how there are these like intercorrelated pieces, yeah, to this power puzzle. And something that strikes me is that often where I notice myself and other people seem to get hung up is this idea that it's an either or situation. And it seems so much more clear to me now, after just this short time we've had together, how often the either or thinking is the problem, because it keeps me from noticing that when someone else has power, so do I, or so might I. Or if I have power, so might someone else. Whether or not I'm engaging as if we both have power or not is maybe the only either or that remains relevant.
You're having some clarity from this discussion that there's sort of these interrelated sort of aspects of power, and one sort of problem that you see, it sounds like, is either or thinking, that this sort of a simplistic either or thinking, and not seeing the sort of the complexity of power.
Yeah, thank you. And I am especially noticing this whole idea that support and help are kind of a fresh new piece to me that I'm seeing. In that, you know, in that question that's kind of floating in the air of how do we help people who are abusing their power and causing harm to make some kind of change. And it occurred to me to think, what if I asked them if they could help me? And what if I asked them if they could, when I asked them to help me, before they say yes or no, if they could just reflect back what they heard me ask? Like, what if I could be the one who brings empathy and a structure, and as a request for help, will you, you know, and in my mind, I can say, I'm asking you to be part of an empathy circle here with me right now, just me and you. And kind of saying, can you help me by just saying what you think you hear back to me after I say some things here for just a quick minute? And what if it could be that easy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so so you're seeing people who are sort of abusing or misusing power, and you're sort of wondering, like, how do you kind of deal with that? And you're thinking perhaps a way is to sort of ask them to hear you, to empathize with you, kind of share something and ask for reflection back. So like a bit of a asking for an empathic reflection here.
Yeah, and maybe I could even say, give them a reflection of themselves as my way of asking for help. Like I could say, you know, can you help me by just reflecting back to me what you hear me say just in this next minute. And if they say yes, then I could say, I notice you seem to be interacting with that lady in a way that seems to be making her feel afraid. Can you just reflect that back to me and tell me, that you hear me? And maybe then the kind of pause that we've been getting for this time together so often might occur, and they will have that little piece of time, that little space that opens up when there's just a simple reflection.
Yeah, so
I feel empowered.
Yeah, so this is something you've got an insight, so something you'd like to try, and it kind of gives you a sense of empowerment. And it's about asking someone who you see that might be abusing a power or having an impact on someone through their power. If you could make a request to them, would you be willing to reflect back what your understanding is that I'm saying? And that might be a way of sort of, creating a constructive, discussion or relationship, or you're sort of trying to create a little mini empathy circle with them and giving you some energy to kind of think of this as a way forward.
Yeah. I think I might be onto something. Thank you. I feel heard.
Okay. I'll speak to Carolina.
I think April didn't speak for a while.
Oh, well, I'll
Edwin.
speak to you anyway.
Okay.
It's my choice, right? So,
Okay.
And the reason I'm speaking to you is I haven't spoken to you recently either. So I think I've spoken to everybody else. So I'm wanting to speak to you. So if you just reflect that back.
So you decided that you will choose me either, even if I ask you to maybe spread the change your choice, because you didn't speak to me for quite long.
Yeah. So I really love what Nicole was saying, because I've used that something similar to that is like in my family, two family members were in conflict. It was like Christmas, and I tell this story a lot because it was so meaningful to me, where my mother and sister-in-law got into a conflict about where the Christmas gifts were, and the kids had gotten into it and all that. And there's this one thing is, one approach could have been, oh, you're wrong in terms of what you're doing. I mean, they're fighting with each other. I could have accused one of them, taken the sides, or try to rescue the other person. But I didn't. I just listened to one family member, and reflected back what they were saying. And then I went and listened to the other family member and reflected back. And it's not easy to do. I was like terrified doing this in the middle of a conflict. So I didn't ask them to reflect first, like Nicole was saying. I first reflected them as the first step.
So you recalling old story, the origin of empathy circle, the moment when there was a huge conflict during Christmas holiday in your family, and two members of your family were quarreling very seriously, and you had two options. You could get involved in this conflict, staying aside on one of them side, but you choose to stay, to try to empathize with everyone, but you start with reflecting back. So you were first person who was reflecting back what they were saying.
Exactly.
With one person, then with the other person.
Back and forth for like 15 minutes, back and forth. And then I said, would you be willing to reflect back to the other person what they're saying until they feel heard, and then they will do the same for you? So it was, how do you bring people who are in judgment, in a conflict, how do you bring them into an empathy circle? And so they started reflecting, and then they, one person would say something and the other would say, they'd want to jump in and say, no, that's not what I said. I said, no, no, just reflect back until they feel heard, then you'll be able to say whatever. So it kind of went back and forth like that for a while. And then the family members who had been hiding in the corners trying to get away from this conflict, they slowly started joining the circle. And then I kind of brought them into the circle. And it turned into this family empathy circle where we had, 6, 7 participants kind of taking part. And and it was like an onion in terms of the conflict, that it kind of started wrapping away, and the whole conflict turned to be about something completely different. It turned out to be whether, one person felt included in the family, if they like mattered in the family. My father got up and said, yes, my sister-in-law, you really matter. Love you. And they had a big, hug in the middle. And, so and it ended really positively, so for me, it was like this super, successful, event in the family.
So you're noticing, you remember that after a while of reflecting back separately, every person in a conflict, you propose them to try reflecting each other. And it wasn't easy because they almost started again quarreling, but you stopped them, you asked them to come back to the process. And after some time you notice that they notice that it's working. And other members of family whom you described as hiding somewhere in the house,
In the
kind of,
corners, yeah, behind the
yeah,
sofas.
they join this circle, and you all end up with one big family circle where people were sharing, mutually listening to each other. And you describe it as a kind of shift that completely changed the dynamics between people.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you. April, would you listen to me?
It would be a pleasure.
Yeah, that's, yeah, how to, I like this concept of supporting people in power to protect others from them, because people in power very often are very alone, very lonely, and they need a lot of support to understand the dynamics of their position, and they also need to be heard.
Yeah, you like the idea of supporting people in power, and you see the real benefits that or the needs that they might have to be heard, and also and that it might be a very lonely job to be in power.
Mm. I'm not sure if I should say that, but I have this impression that, well, for example, Roger Hallam is person of high rank in our movement, and lately giving him opportunity to be heard and understood in empathy circle, I think that changed a lot. That changed dynamics in relations, because I was very critic about Roger Hallam, And I change my relation to him, what I think about him.
I heard that in participating in an empathy cafe with someone who's seen in XR as having a significant amount of power, Roger, that being in empathic presence with him, being able to listen and really hear and know that you've heard what it is that he really has to say, has shifted your perceptions of him as a person, or of his behavior, or I wasn't quite clear.
Well, I think that, yeah, because I wasn't clear. I think I suppose it changed my view on label named Roger Hallam, because it functions as a label, but behind this label is a live person. And I suddenly saw this person, not the label.
So I heard you recognize that sharing empathy in this kind of structure can really help you see past the image almost that's projected of a person in power, and see to the real person within.
Yeah. And for me, it was nourishing, really nourishing. Discussing, disagreeing, but talking to person, not to label of power.
Yes, that there could, in the discussion, you could still hear disagreement. You didn't have to agree with everything, but you really felt that you could connect to a person and not just a label, a banner.
Yeah. So this is kind of aspect that of support. And I'm wondering how it impacted Roger. I'm very curious about it.
I hear that it had an impact on you, and you wonder whether or if it had an impact, what impact it might have had on Roger.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Dean, I would like to speak with you. Okay. I was really interested in what Nicole was talking in her kind of revelation of that. Oh, could it be as simple as this? And I took a very similar problem to Mickey Kashtan yesterday in our XR open calls, global calls with Mickey. And and of course her definition of power is the ability to mobilize resources to meet the needs that you see. The ability to mobilize resources. I'll leave it at that. Oh, you're still muted, Dean. There.
I sort of lost the first part then, just sorry. But I did hear the second part, which was to talk about some people's vision of what they perceive as power is the ability to mobilize resources to get something done. The first part, it was sort of slightly mixed up, but I did hear you mentioning Nicole and what Nicole was mentioning earlier on, and about how it caused you to see power in this other listening circle, sorry, empathy circle. I do apologise.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I was just reflecting on what Nicole said. So my observations from the place of guardianship, supposedly protecting these principles and values that XR UK holds as the only thing you need to align yourselves with to be in XR, this has been the one I have most struggled with, this principle. And therefore I've been a watcher more than a participant.
So I'm hearing, but not seeing, but hearing about, as being a guardian of the XR principles, this principle that we're discussing today is the one that's caused the most, not problems, but the most reasons why you are watching it rather than actually being a participant in it.
Yes, and
Right, apologise.
in my observation of how power has circulated and got stuck within the self-organizing system that we generated supposedly to partly to mitigate that, to circulate power, to have spokespeople between things. I have seen by my observations very clearly where that has fallen down. I'll stop there. Broken down, perhaps.
I am hearing that you are saying that the self-organizing system has choke points, whereby the power seems to not necessarily have worked as was initially set out.
Okay, thank you. And that wasn't what I said, and I totally get why that is what you would extrapolate from what I said. So I would love to hold myself to more rigor that I have observed. I have observations about not participating, about where the self-organizing system has broken down. I'm not saying it's got started. I'm not saying yet, like, you know, what that was kind of your pick up on what you thought I'd said. So that's really interesting. I love how this brings that out, shows me where I get somebody's leapt ahead of what I'm saying. Already.
That's very quick. So my leaping ahead of what you were trying to convey to me, to my to impose upon it my own conclusions, was an interesting experience for you to cogitate over, because it's not necessarily what you were trying to say, but it's interesting to hear what someone was saying, even though it wasn't what you were saying.
Yep, I feel heard. Thank you.
Excuse me. Oh dear. I will choose Edwin again. You've been quiet for a while, Edwin, I think, haven't you?
No, Nicole was quite.
Oh, Nicole, right. Sorry, can I unchoose you, Edwin? Will you not take it personally?
No, I don't take it personally.
Okay.
So I hear you're concerned about me taking it personally. Yeah. So.
Nicole, I find it very hard sometimes in these empathy circles to stay on point because of the emotions that they invoke in me.
I hear you expressing that sometimes in empathy circles, you have emotions invoked in you, and it becomes tricky for you to stay on point.
Yeah. I came in with lots of highbrow, big ideas of what to talk about today, but they've all gone by the by. Because instead of all this intellectual muscle flexing, as usual, the empathy circle has negated that, and it's gone down to my soul, and it's gone down to the inner core of me, because we are being so honest, and the honesty is such a refreshing tonic nowadays.
I hear you describing that when you came in, you were maybe anticipating all kinds of intellectual muscle flexing, and that you found, once again, sounds like you're not entirely surprised to find yourself kind of in your soul instead.
Yeah. Me, like many others who've experienced this, really do just find ourselves applying it all over the place. I have even applied it in my own family. I have sat us down for half hour each day, and we've just talked, and we've got the other two to reflect on what they thought they'd heard. And then we carried on doing this. And it's been a really interesting experience, because my teenager absolutely loves it, because she's hearing us reflecting on her and reflecting on each other in an honest way, that it's no longer just the repartee or the wit or the banter. It's just so, yeah.
I hear you describing how you've used the skills you've learned in empathy circles to set up a bit of an empathy circle for your family. And I hear you telling that especially your teenager has really enjoyed it, the honesty of getting to really just hear from their family, and to bring it into like just more real relating.
Normally I'm the father, and I feel I have a certain role to fulfill. That need is gone over the last year or so. And it's just very odd finding this new place compared to my education and what I was indoctrinated into believing that my role should be. So I like the change, but I do find myself occasionally resorting to type, and I can pick it up straight away when I'm doing it. I go, oh, that's the old me. Don't like it. Stop it. But it's still there, and it's annoying.
I hear you describing how in the last year or so, your ideas and maybe your expectations of yourself as a father in this role, and as a intellectual person and an educated person, has shifted and changed in a way that you really like. And I hear you describing that you find it kind of jarring and maybe disappointing to notice the times that it still comes up and kind of gets active.
Yeah. So this is why this principle is so important, and this is why I like what we've done today, because it's not about spreading the power. It's actually about helping those in power to feel supported. This is a new mindset that I hadn't thought of. I thought, oh my God, this is an epiphany.
So I hear you describing that you've had an epiphany, that that this, what we're doing now, is how we do support people in power, and help them to be more honest, and maybe come back to that more soulful place.
Yes, because people in power do become isolated. They try and retain that common touch, but they've lost it by actually getting into their position of power just through that whole process. So to have that touch of someone else in a purely honest way rather than in an arrogant or intellectual way, we'll rehumanize them instead of them being dehumanized.
Mm. I hear you describing how you notice that when empathy is used to kind of help a person in power to know that they're not alone and know that they're not, that it's not forgotten that they're human, that it actually has the effect of maybe reminding them that they are human, and it helps them to then be in touch with others in a humane way, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. I feel heard.
Caroline, now will you hear me, please?
Okay, I will listen to you.
Thank you. I knew that coming here today would be of great benefit to me, both to remind me what happens when I remember to actively listen and reflect back to people, and also because I knew what would happen while I was in the practice and reaping the benefit of it while I practiced.
So you acknowledging that you knew that coming today to the Empathy Circle, Empathy Cafe will be very helpful, important for you, because you remember what has happened last time when you were in Empathy Circle in this process, reflecting how powerful it was for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I facilitate and host empathy circles under a different title, and in the last week or so, I've put them on hold because I've had so many responsibilities kind of pile on to me, and it was such a relief to know I could come here and still participate and give and receive empathy. And the magic of this particular principle just seems so at work, like so blatantly obvious to me right now, that this is what this is all about. This is how we create a regenerative culture, through empathy, because empathy does have us end up mitigating for power.
So you mentioned that doing you facilitating a practice of Empathy Circle and under different name, different label, but lately you had to stop doing it because you didn't have much time. You were occupied with a lot of other things, but you realize that you still might participate in this Empathy Circle and experience this feeling of being heard. And you realize now how powerful is, how creative is Empathy Circle. Creative in the sense that it creates regenerative culture. That this process creates culture that is regenerative.
And one of the things that happened in my life that it brought me to kind of scraping some things off my plate so that I would have less to be responsible for was that last Thursday night, my eldest son attempted suicide by drug overdose. And the conversations I've been having with the medical people and the recovery people have all kind of pointed me toward disengaging from him. And I've been really grappling because it seems like a power move to me, while it also seems as a acknowledgement of my own inadequacies in power to be of beneficial influence to him.
In last days, your eldest son commits suicide by overdose of drugs, and the whole situation around trying to recover him, rescue him, and decisions you had to make was I'm not sure if I understand you correctly. Would you help me this fragment?
Sure, thank you. I understand that he did what he did because he doesn't like how his life is going, and that he feels powerless to choose other means to make it go how he wants it to go.
So you realize that your son did it because he felt powerless. He felt not able to make his life as he would like to.
And often in our conversations, they become a power struggle of blame and accusation, and me wanting to, be acknowledged and heard by him, and him feeling unheard by me.
You're noticing that your talks with him are very often a power struggle. They are full of blaming and shaming. They are full of accusations, not hearing each other.
Yeah, and even up until just before this call, it seemed clear to me that the answer was to just stop trying with him. And now here I am thinking, why not just reflect him back to himself?
So you realize that you could just stop doing that and try to hear, reflect back.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you. I feel heard.
Thank you. I think we run of time, Edwin.
Yeah, I just closing the rooms. So
Thank you, everyone. We can come back to the main session. Thank you, Nicole,
thanks
for
everyone.
what you said.
Yeah.
Let's come back to the main session. And let's wait for others in the main session. Hello, everyone back. Let's wait for the rest of us. Edwin, if we can continue, or we still waiting for people coming back?
Everybody should be back in 1 second.
Okay, so let's wait.
They should. I think everybody's back now. The timer ran out, so there we go.
I think we haven't got Nelly.
I'm here.
Oh.
Okay. So please, I would like to ask everyone for muting ourselves. That will help with background noise. Please mute yourself. Thank you. So now we are all back in a main session. And we start the last part, that is report for our from our breakout rooms, from our discussion. And I will maybe pick everyone on my screen in order I see you. So please start with your name, location, and XR group you are part of, and then share any feelings, any insights you have about this principle, principle number 7. Anything that you take with you from this meeting. So first one on my screen is John Bito.
Hello, thanks for calling on me. It's a real privilege to be able to talk with people from around the world in a way that's so connected, and I just want to express my gratitude to the organizers and everyone who arrived today. Yeah, I mean, I think you know, a reminder to think about mitigating for power in terms, you're keeping the frame of the power that that we kind of live under with government and corporate power, and also the idea that when we bring our work into the community, we can attract people by showing that there's another another framing of power that allows us all to be empowered. So thanks again.
Thank you. Dean.
I'm Dean from Plymouth. I'm involved in lots of little bits. I'm not officially in any circles as such. We had a very powerful debate and discussion and review of each other's understanding of what power truly was. And I came to an epiphany that instead of being anti-power, what I needed to be was more sympathetic to power and more supportive to those in power rather than trying to undermine them. So it was a very interesting reflection. So I thank all those that were with me today, and it was very emotional and very personal. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole, would you share with us?
My name is Nicole Hartley Bradford. I'm in Calgary, Canada, where I'm with XR and other regenerative culture movement nodes and hubs. And the insight that's really strong for me right now is that it is what we were doing in our circle that mitigated for power. This is how I share power. This is how, when I have power, I empower others, and this is how I let them be powerful with me, is by using empathy and reflective listening in order to bring us out of our heads and out of our muscles into our hearts and our souls. So I'm so grateful that I've been able to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Edwin, would you share?
Yeah, we had sort of a multi-dimensional discussion about power. So seeing it from a lot of different vantage points, like everybody brings their own perspective, their own view, awareness of power. So that was really interesting to sort of really enrich the sort of understanding of power. And it came up about being able to empathize here, people who are empowered. They might be feeling lonely, which sort of fit in with this thought I've been having about doing an action like in front of like the Capitol, the state or national Capitol. And we're there to insist that we can listen to the people in power empathically. We demand to be able to listen to you, but then also for you to listen to each other and to listen to us. So to demand basically that they take part in an empathy circle. So I've been sort of strategizing around that. And I got some components, some ideas on how to, from our discussion. So I really appreciate that. Oh, and I don't know if I said it. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area and XR Empathy Circle work group.
Okay, thank you. April, would you share with us?
Oh, hi, I'm April. I'm currently in Scotland, and I'm in the XR UK Guardianship and Visioning Circle. Yeah, it was deeply moving and really heart-opening. And I loved the sense, that the actual living sensation of sharing power through this empathic model. And there's something, I have really struggled with this principle and how to actually activate it within the system that we've built, that we've also already brought our inherited and educated trauma into, and how to actually mitigate power when you're dealing with people who aren't even aware of the traumatic behaviors they're exhibiting, or traumatized. And I've really struggled with it. And if I take that to empathize with governments, then one of the things that I'm really aware of is they are absolutely rooted in the belief that there's no other way to do democracy. This is it. This is what we've got. And yet, 3 months ago, they were also really rooted in the fact that we won't bring the planes down and people won't stop driving their cars. So that has happened. I believe there is another way to do democracy that is rooted in the ground of empathy sharing from the ground up to generate the ideas of how we govern ourselves, how we organize ourselves. And we haven't got it right yet in XR. There's another way. Thank you.
Thank you. Douglas?
Douglas, XR Northampton, XR UK, Guardianship and Visioning. I think that's about it. I suppose there are particular things I'll take away from things that came up in the group, but in some ways the bigger thing I take away, or the next thing, is it's such a layered and there's so many interconnected layers of it. There's so much unfolding. I do have very strong beliefs about how things, you know, I'm participating in democracy, rooted a lot in sort of the anarchist prefigurative approach, but it's not that that's the right way, but it is about power with and grassroots, and how do we get there, and what sort of conversations and spaces will support that journey to finding, if you like, the healthiest way forward. Because like April, we're not there yet, in my view. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Douglas. Marguerite, you are muted.
Yeah, yes, we talked a lot about power, difficulties of power within XR, and yeah, that people in positions of power should be given some sort of learning or some sort of training. But and I wanted to, I just feel that on a personal level, I feel I've come much more into my own power coming into XR, and also what I feel I've learned is I often enjoy being an empathy circle where there's more people than just 3 or 4. I like listening to other people. I learn a lot from listening. So that it was a good circle. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Maureen O'Connor.
Thank you. Yes, it was a good circle. I suppose what I've experienced was that being listened to in itself is empowering. And the XR movement can give a voice. And we live in a world, I think, where many people feel they have no voice or they are voiceless. So since we in XR, to some extent, feel that we've been given an opportunity to have a voice, how can we become the voice for not just the creation itself, nature, but voice for voiceless people? And how can we empower in the sense of, if we are in a leadership or in a privileged position, of finding a voice, maybe even if on the street with a placard, whatever it is, it's a voice. And the kind of responsibility that goes with that then is to, as leaders, to become a voice for voiceless, so that when we have a mass movement of people who get voices, then we will achieve what XR is claiming is looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul.
I found the conversation in our group to be really interesting. I'm in the Ottawa Valley. I'm associated with a number of national and local groups, but not XR in particular. I'm very interested in XR, and I'm also very interested in this process. So I'm taking part in this. Thank you. This series. 2 thoughts. One is, the first one is that there were several people in our group that led the discussion totally into the area of actually everybody but me, I think. Mitigation for power inside XR. And I understand it's a principle of the operation of XR that we were talking about, but I actually thought we might talk about mitigation for power in the broader world. So that was kind of a difference for me from what I thought looking at the principle. the other thing is that from my own experience as a coalition builder and a person who's been a facilitator a lot, I really became aware of the difference in the kind of political structure or ideology, I say, of XR compared to what I've normally worked in, and some questions around it for me, which is kind of good because it means I won't necessarily go off and join XR actively until I've sorted through it. But in my role as facilitator of large coalitions, one of the things that I've really paid attention to in the whole question of mitigation of power blocks, let's say, is to notice who isn't taking part. When people stop taking part, or when they stop expressing their views, or in coalitions that have different caucuses involved in them. So, and
Thank
to go
you.
after the answer to that. What is the reason?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Next on my screen is Jamie. Jamie, would you share with us?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was in the same group, and it's funny. I guess I didn't really notice that happening directly because I was so wrapped up in it, in terms of like how we kind of very much focused on, like, you know, breaking down structures of power within XR. I suppose for me, a lot of the time I've been quite focused on that. So that's natural for me. And I suppose there were elements I really identified with, kind of like the experience within XR of like other people in the group. And then also found it interesting where we had very different experiences related to that. Yeah. Yeah, it was really good group. It was really interesting to hear people's different perspectives, and yeah, nice to see a good few familiar faces as well in my group. Yeah, I appreciated that. I
Thank
must be
you,
coming
Jamie.
to many of these things. All right,
Thank you,
thank you.
Jamie. And Jordan.
Yes, it was an interesting group, and yeah, it was some of our time was definitely sort of introspectively looking at Extinction Rebellion and linking some of the tensions with the power, and that we've moved to kind of put that power is in groups and in the system rather than in individuals, or a tendency for that. But actually, for that to work too, there needs to be kind of probably more transparency and communication around them, so that it's understandable to anybody in Extinction Rebellion, and it isn't necessarily. But also, we had 2 mothers with babies in our group, and we explored a bit the power, the need to mitigate for that lack of power in that situation, which was interesting to think about that some as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bill.
Well, as usual, I was really felt enriched by all the diversity of the experiences that I heard, and for me, sort of the way to go forward is listening, listening to other people, and kind of trying to, you know, not be so dogmatic. And then the other issue was like the regen culture and the issue of building community. And it really, for others and for me too, I resonate that this has to be job one. If we can't feel that we are together and that we have aligned values, then we can't act in unison and effectively. So I'm looking to grow that. And I thought today was a great step in that direction. I really appreciated everybody's participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Karen?
Yes, I'm Karen from XR Paris, France. And I'm part of the regenerative culture in France as well. I just started the empathy circle with the lockdown. And that's important for me to be there tonight because I'm learning a lot about what is empathy circle. And that was interesting tonight, for me is tonight, sorry, to see that power is different function of everybody, because for some it was important to talk about XR. For some other we talk about politics, and for other it was about business. But we were all agree to say that it's important for XR to say that there is no power in the movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie, Katie Fiesel,
Yeah, I found it interesting listening to different people's experience of power, if you like, and the conflict within yourself, that you can be powerful and you can be disempowered at the same time, and how you manage that conflict within yourself, I guess. It was something one of the other people said that's really stuck in my head about perhaps feeling guilty because of your privilege. And it's interesting. I just found that fascinating, because coming from a male perspective as well, rather than female, because we discussed that a little bit as well. Yes, it was a really, really good group, very honest, and I valued everybody's perspectives, and it's left me with some thinking. So yeah, thank you very much. It was good. Gratitude.
Thank you, Katie. AC.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, okay. I was in that big group, which was very interesting and rich in its perspectives and like diversity of subjects on the topic. And so like the biggest thing that I think I'm taking away from this, also two things. So the first thing is that I just have so many more questions and so much more to think about and wonder about on this topic. So now I'll just put that out as like an open invitation to talk about it more later to anyone. And then the second thing that really stood out or really found its way into my awareness is this notion of power in like an unpolarized sense. So when we talk about mitigating for power, one thing that I started thinking about was empowering other people. And so kind of reflecting on the distinction between constructive versus maybe toxic or oppressive power. So mitigating, like kind of disassembling structures for abuse of power and empowering equitable participation and agency. So yeah, the question is like where, what, and how is rolling through my mind. So many questions, but a great time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Nelly.
Yeah. I also really enjoyed our group and all the inputs. I see myself as part of XR Global, and I'm working with people from XR and other organizations. And what I understood from this circle today was that it's very good to work as a small group and integrate differences to be able to go to other places, to maybe some political congregation or to some associations, to some meetings, and go there as a group, and then as a group name things which prevent power being distributed equally, and also show as a group, playfully teach the other group where we go how things could be done a bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. Hester.
Hi. Yeah, I found it quite emotional. It became a lot about it married up with my personal experience this week of disputes about misuse of power and working groups in exile, which I found very distressing. So I shared some of that, and I think I became emotional when it was sort of observed, being a mother, that there is you're in a different situation in terms of the power of the situation that you're presented with. So I started thinking about, or what I'm going to take away from this is how to make to improve accessibility of the movement, so that really everyone can participate. Not really everyone, not the same people, the same voices, the same, so we have more of the same always. And echoing with me now April's words about the trauma that we take with us into the movement. And I think that's why I found these disputes this week very traumatic. One of them exists within the regenerative culture circles, and it was very, very ugly, quite hideous actually. So I'm a little bit reeling from that. I'm very worried. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for this and making this the topic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So my screen a little bit is changing, but I think the last one is Marta and then me. Marta. You are muted, Marta.
Oh, thank you. It's very rich. I got a lot of thoughts. I've got access of power as a curse. If in excess, I wouldn't want it upon myself, and also that hurt people hurt. It's a bit that trauma thing, isn't it? That's like, if people have a lot of power, they need supports so that they can actually do a good job. And I've seen bullies with good supports become leaders. So I think I really believe it's possible. And that as a society, we've got this problem that Mihi Kashtan likes to speak of the learned powerlessness. And yeah, I don't know. If you haven't done it yet, I recommend the Oppression and Movement Building Workshop in XR. I think everyone should do it at least once. And it helps. It helps with the dealing with power in ourselves. And, it's a way of training, because we've not been taught at school how to sit in our power. And so we need to do it as adults, basically. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
I would like to ask if I miss anyone because my screen was a little bit changing. So please unmute yourself and say. Yeah. So last one, I'm the last one. So I have to say that as a person in power during today's meeting, I feel speechless. I don't know what to say. I have a lot of notes, but focusing about all elements of my power during this meeting make me unable to focus on my feedback and report to you what I am taking with me. So probably after this meeting, I will look again at my notes, which I have on my sheets, and I will really realize what I'm taking from this meeting. But it was very powerful. I'm sometimes saying that I have this I love to have this moment when something clicks and the empathy circle become very, very intense. And it happened today. And I'm very grateful for that. Thank you, participants of my circle. Thank you. So now this is the last few comments of this Empathy Cafe. We have a lot of different Empathy Cafe we organize. I will now share with you in chat a few links which you can look at. But please, if you want to look at them, you need to copy those links because they will disappear when we end the meeting. So please copy them. And among them, you have a short video and handouts. Is everything is okay? Do you hear me? Hello, does anybody hear me?
We hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because I, for a second, thought that, okay. So you in the among those links you have information, short videos and handouts about Empathy Circle. You have also the one page about the method. You have also linked to Empathy Circle working group where you can find all our events. And the nearest Empathy Cafe we have is on Monday at 8 a.m. Universal Time. It's the empathy organized by Sydney Region Sydney, Exploring Region One-on-One, very quite famous regenerative culture booklet about, and we will discuss part self-care and action care in Empathy Circle method. So please feel welcome. And next week on Saturday, we discuss principle number 8, which is we avoiding blaming and shaming. Thank you, everyone. Edwin as us main host usually. Would you like add anything?
Just hope everyone starts facilitating your own empathy circles. That's what we're here for. You've done it. Now you have some skills to do it yourself. Dean, yes, doing it in your family. That was great. You mentioned that. So we hope that you'll facilitate. We're going to have more facilitation training cohorts coming shortly. We have facilitator support group. So get out there and, set up your own empathy circles. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. And I would like to ask co-facilitators today to stay for a short debriefing. And thank you, everyone, and goodbye. See you next.
Thanks, Carolina, for facilitating.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.